Okay, we are streaming live on Facebook. The webinar is live here. I don't know how many people we have in here right now, but if you missed my first comment about muting your microphone, please do that now so that we don't hear you. Okay, I thought you were going to be coming down. Okay, sorry, just looking on. Let me close the chat here. All right, everybody, thank you for showing up. I'm sure people will be coming on as we go. Welcome to the first San Diego Premiere Pro user group online version. So hopefully everybody can see and hear what's going on. If you can't, post in the chat window. In case you're wondering why it says my name is Jill, that's because my name is now Jill. Hello. No, my wife let me use her Zoom account so we could do this. And so I logged in as Jill, and apparently you all are Eric because that's who she invited with the link that I sent. So you can change your name. If you go into the participants chat, you are able to change your name there. And so I would recommend doing that, although some of you I can see, so, you know, like Wayne, I know Wayne's not Eric. So anyway, so I guess without further ado, I will let DJ go ahead and do his thing. A couple of announcements, I guess, before we get started. I should say that we hopefully will be back meeting next month in person, but if not, we will do this again. Hopefully, you know, I hope you all are well, and hopefully no one has contracted this virus. I guess a good thing to talk about next month, if we all still are doing this, would be working from home. If that's a topic that sounds good to you, let me know, and we can try to put a meeting together based on around that idea. Because yeah, a lot of us are probably going to be working from home. A lot of us probably already work from home. So that's one thing. When somebody who recommended that topic to me and said, "Oh, you should do work from home," but I think a lot of us do nowadays. So anyway, so I'm going to turn it over to DJ and let him kick off the meeting, and he will tell you what we're going to talk about. So DJ, you want to take it away?
Hey, how's it going, everybody? So this meeting,
DJ, I just signed on and I was waiting on Meetup trying to find out where the link was, and then I found it on Facebook. So I don't know if anybody else is still trying to find it.
You should have received an email from Meetup with the link. So I sent an email out to everybody that signed up via Meetup with that link, and it should be posted to the message board in Meetup as well.
all right, so everybody can hear me? Okay. So yeah, what we're going to be going through today is kind of a VFX 101. So what I kind of thought about in this, and maybe I'm trying to do too much, we'll see, I don't know, is since nobody's going to be shooting anything for a while, I thought about a lot of the videos that I made when I first started that were kind of, you know, made with stock footage. So everything that you're seeing tonight is actually pretty crappy stock footage that I found off Envato and similar sites like that. So it's, you know, how can you turn that kind of stuff into stuff? But mostly it's just a VFX. I just wouldn't necessarily, you know, some of the things we'll talk about are dealing with like H.264 and kind of crappy compression issues. But yeah, so like I said, you know, like the meeting notes said, it's all about isolation tonight. So let's isolate together. All right. So one of the things that I've covered, and you know, before and in other pieces, but never really gone into it, is track mats. So like a track mat, for instance, is, you know, you've got, you have a piece of footage and you want to show, for example, something through that. Kind of make a window to something else. You see it a lot of times with text that behind the, you know, through the text, you see a city shot.
Hey, DJ.
Yeah.
Don't forget to share your screen.
Oh, yeah. That's good, too. Thank you. All right. So, boom. And boom. Thank you. All right. So, for example, it would be something along the lines where if you wanted to see something behind Corona. All right. So, in this case, all a track mat is for example, we want to throw a, we want to throw this this effect on there, just kind of a grunge map, and we want to throw it on our coronavirus text. Well, we could easily, do what I just did, which is throw on the, just throw a blending mode, but it's not within the text. So all you do is you come down here to track mat and you change it to alpha mat. Wrong one. Change it to alpha mat and make sure there. Okay. So what we've done here is we took the coronavirus, and we'll build this from scratch just to, because I got ahead of myself. All right. So we've got everything here. We take our coronavirus text, we duplicate it, we drag it above it, then we change it to alpha mat, boom. And that should hide that. So you can see a little bit in here, a little bit of the texture. But what if we want something that's a little bit stronger, just to make the point a little better?
You're still adding too. I'm not sure if that.
Yeah. Okay. That's we're wanting something a little subtle.
Gotcha.
So we in here and shrink that down. It's rotated around a bit. All right, we can do it again. Duplicate our coronavirus, track mat, alpha, boom. So we can build up layers like this. And that's really what a track mat is. It's taking the alpha in this case and saying everything that's in this layer is visible in accordance with the alpha of this layer. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. And but you always see them, in this case, you always see them with these same kind of Photoshop two-piece little icons. The bottom one is visible, the top one is not, because the top one is defining what is visible on the bottom one, if that makes sense. Why did I start there? It's just to kind of build up to different ways that we're going to use throughout the night. So another way that you could do it, for example, is let's change all these back to no track mat, and let's get rid of all the extras. So now we just have one coronavirus and then our three textures, but they're not being matted. We can come over here to set mat and then change our mat layer to that. Copy a stretch, and then we're going to want to set it to all of these so that we can see it. Boom. And then let's play with the stretch mat pieces. So we'll see here that we're so what set mat does is it does the same thing so that you can only use one version of it, but the drawback to it, so that you're not having to have so many layers of track mats. The drawback to it is you get into these issues of making sure that all of your layers are the same size. So for example, our daguerreotype is really big, so it's stretched out. So what do you do in that case? I'm not sure if that's 100% making, if I'm being clear on that. But the problem is that each of these layers is a different size. We come over, we see daguerreotype is 2791 by 3664. This one is 4878. So it's not applying it in the exact same way as this one. This one's just a simple pass through of boom. And there's your, there it is. It matches it entirely. Set mat applies it to the size of the layer. So I hope that's a little bit more clear. And you can see that in here with these being a various size. Yeah. So why would you use set mat since it seems to complicate things? One of the examples that let's say we have a piece of text, for example, here, and I just keyframed the color. Let's say that these are your client's colors. They have ugly colors, but let's just say that they do. So we can come up here to set mat. And in this case, I've got just this, it says it's gold metallic, but I kind of desaturated it to make it a silver. And then there's our mat. So I come over to set mat, turn it on. And here, instead of just doing alpha or the lightness like you can in track mat, you can do it by various channels. So you can have the red mat. So that, for example, as it fades to the green, it fades out. So you can see what's going on here with, this is our matte layer, the one where I keyframed the fill layer. So it goes from red to green to blue. Here, it goes from opaque and fades out. And you can easily change that without having to keyframe the opacity. You can easily change that to the blue layer so that it kind of slowly comes in. You can do it to the green channel so that you kind of hang out and it doesn't go away completely because of the blue I chose. I had a little bit of green in it. So it just gives you a little bit more flexibility in, I mean, where the annoyances of size, especially for using it with regard to materials, you know, and grunge mats that might be of different sizes, where it's going to benefit you is in the flexibility of using hue, of using the different red and green and blue channels. It just makes, you know, you're able to mix things up a little bit. Does that generally make sense? That's kind of just the setup for a few of these things. It's just kind of dipping our toe in there. So does that make general sense though? We're good?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Cool.
So
now,
DJ,
yeah.
Quick question. When you have it, if you set it to alpha and it's referring to the size of the matted layer, is that just a, when you set up your project, would you just go about like resizing all your layers so they're a more manageable, kind of just managing your files before you start doing that?
You could pre-comp everything into like layer size, and that would help. You know, that would, if you were going to use setmat. TrackMat largely made setmat like an alpha setmat, largely kind of obsolete.
Mm-hmm.
But if you were going to use it, or if you're using it for red channel and that kind of thing, you would just want to pre-comp the layers so that they're all the same size, so that you are kind of getting that one-to-one like we were getting with, you know.
Gotcha. I get a bunch of set mats all the time from various agencies, and I always wonder, I never have ever used it, so it's nice to see this explained.
Yeah, because setmat is applied to the layer that it's on. So for example, you know, if with this one, it's on a layer that is 7800. It doesn't care that our comp is going to be, you know, 1920. So in that case, we come, you know, if we were going to set mat this, we'd turn it back to 100. We'd pre-comp it.
Gotcha. So it all becomes about pre-comping and then managing.
And then
there.
We would, you know, then we'd come in here and size it to what we want. So kind of, you know, let's just say that. And then we could set, you know, when we come into set mat, it's on a 1920 layer, so that boom, it's nice. You know, it's doing what we expect it to. Gotcha.
Cool.
The other issue with that, what you get into with track mats that makes them really cool are you can it affects the you know, it actually affects it. So so the alpha, since the alpha is changing, it actually changes the what's being, you know, brought into the piece. So as I blur this, the alpha is changing, so it changes what can peek through. But since setmat is an effect and not its own kind of thing, the render order of that doesn't have the same effect. So no effect. It doesn't change it at all. So that is another limiting factor, that since it's an effect versus a matte scenario, the effects are, it's rendered before the blur effects would be on the layer that it's looking at. So that's the kind of crappy. But yeah, so that's track mats, that's set mats. We'll come back to set mats as we move along. But I just kind of wanted to start there. So as we go through things for the next few weeks, you're probably going to be making stuff with shots that you don't particularly, like, can't really control. So my thought was, you know, we've covered green screen before. We'll touch, you know, I'll touch on a couple little tips later tonight, but you know, we know how to, generally we know how to green screen. But what if you get a shot that's like this, where, you know, your client gives you this goofy pterodactyl, I think there. Yeah, it gives you a pterodactyl and gives you this kind of crappy, you know, shot where the colors are weird. There's no way, you know, how would you, and he wants it flying through the sky. So you could try going into key light, and you're like, all right, you know, I can take out the blue. That shouldn't be a big deal. And then, doom. And we can, but the problem is he really wants it this size. And, you know, if the pterodactyl's that size and behind the clouds, like that's a really freaking big pterodactyl because the clouds are way up there. You know, you want it to be close because that's how it's going to feel threatening. The dinosaurs in Jurassic Park weren't scary because they were really far away. So, you know, you could sit here and you could roto it. You could do roto brush, but, you know, anybody that's used roto brush knows that it's really good for some things, and we'll talk about some of those in a little bit. But if you're spending more than like 30 minutes in roto brush, that's not fun. You know, because roto brush, of all the tools in After Effects, roto brush has the most kind of diminishing returns. So how do you get it back there? And really, it's one of those effects that a lot of people have seen, you know, 100 times and just never really thought about. And what we'll do is we'll duplicate it, our background layer, because, you know, the trees are going to be in front of the pterodactyl, and we're going to go into extract. So extract, it's under the keying pieces, but it doesn't make a whole lot of sense because sometimes, you know, you're doing this and you're like, all right, well, that didn't do exactly what I wanted to. So, you know, you're playing with luminance. So in this case, you look and you're wanting to preserve the green. You want to get rid of the sky and the clouds. So the first thing you would think, you know, is that you want to key out the blue. So you'd select the blue. But once you kind of get in here, you'll start to see that you know, that kind of works, but particularly when he goes behind the clouds, the amount of blue that's in the cloud versus the pterodactyl, versus the tree, there's a slightly similar amount. So I've actually, you know, in this one, you want to go with the color that's the furthest from anything. That's the red. And you're going to, you know, we'll play with this a little bit so that let's maybe throw in like around a 50. We want to clamp it down pretty hard. So what we've done, what this did was, this is basically setting our black and white points. And then we're going to crank up on the softness just because that's what's eating this away. So we'll go back in again, red, and you can see that if I grab it, there we go. So we're bringing up the tolerance of what is visible and what's considered, you know, see-through. So I think we'll pop it in right about here because you don't want to adjust. You don't want to adjust these more than you have to because you are getting rid of information. It's not so dangerous since you're kind of compositing it back on top of itself. I mean, if you get rid of stuff over here, no big deal. It's on top of itself. But, you know, you still want to kind of have a lighter touch with pretty much all this stuff. So that gets you there largely. You know, we get in and it looks chunky, but, you know, this dude's moving. And so that's not too bad. So from there, we can just kind of crank around on the softness a little bit. And that's these bottom little ticks. You can also use I always use the little turnstiles, but you can do either. And that's looking pretty good right in there. You know, that's because the thing you have to remember is, for one, no one's going to be zoomed up 200%. And the other thing is this dude's moving. So we're already starting to get in there. But he's going back behind the blue. So what is going on? And I was wrong. I did use the blue on this. I was experimenting with it earlier. So my bad. You want to go with the blue because I know why I've made that mistake. I apologize, and I'll explain that when we get to the keying section. But yes, you'll want to go, in this case, the blue. Okay? So ignore the red thing I said earlier. You go with the blue. These two are the keying. We'll talk about that there. So, okay. So so you've got your guy, you know, showing up a little bit. In this case, I dropped his opacity down just because I wanted him to be color matched a little bit. This was 100%. Since he is further away, you want a little bit of haze in there. A lot of VFX is just about breaking down the image, kind of, bust it up a little bit so that it's not so perfect, and not so difficult, you want it to feel good. So also, so we also want to throw in a little bit of motion blur as he's going. And that's starting to feel pretty good. We could go into color correction a little bit on him, or color grading, but that I wanted to actually save. We'll go ahead and go into that now. So what we have here is this guy. So he's obviously put in to this very blue shot. He doesn't feel like he's there. Similar to how our pterodactyl doesn't feel like he's there. I'm kind of moving away from this shot for color correction only because once we start playing with his opacity, it gets a little less obvious. So I think that this piece is a better one for color match. So when we're looking at it as a color piece, none of us, I don't think any of us are colorists, so that it gets hard to kind of eyeball it. And there's a lot of various ways that you can go through, and there's different equations that you can go through where you can eyedropper it and figure out exactly what's the white point in this and what's the white point in that. But that's a lot of math and it's a lot of difficulty. So and I try to avoid math and difficulty as much as I can. So what I kind of use two tools. The first one is levels, and this is actually my preferred method. But you want to break it away from looking at it as a color image because there's just too much going on. Is this what yellow would look like in this background shot? I don't know. It's hard to say. So what we're going to do is we'll pop into our different channels. I see there's some stuff in chat, but I don't see where the chat is. So I apologize to that.
I'll keep you updated on it. So
okay. Sounds good. Yeah, so we're looking at, we're into levels. If anyone's not used levels before, just a very quick thing. It's mostly for kind of, you moving the color in and out points. You use it a lot. You'll see it, people use it a lot as kind of the last effect, or one of the last effects that they use to finish things, just to kind of crush the blacks, make the white pop, add a little bit of contrast in a little bit more of a flexible way than just the brightness and contrast that's in Lumetri. But the other thing it's really made for is for color matching your shots like this. So you can dive into red and you'll go up here, go into your red channel. So all you want to do when you're looking at it like this is make it look like a reasonably good grayscale image. So in this case, you see, he's way too hot. So we're going to want to bring that down a little bit. And to do so, just kind of play around with the black. And that's going to darken him up a little bit here, change the black input. That's a little too much. And really, you can just kind of play around with these and you're going to see what works and what doesn't. I try to mostly use the inputs and the outputs, which are these on the ends. The more you play with the gamma, which is the middle, it can kind of do some funky things. So in this case, this is the red input going into the effect. So this is what the shot looks like. You're raising everything that is red below this point is considered nothing. So, you're darkening it up a bit as far as our grayscale image goes. So I've tweaked that a little bit, and I like to bring down the input white on these sometimes, and that kind of darkens this piece. It'll darken the whites a little bit, and that's starting to feel right. Now what you'll see is we're going to do these, and it's when we switch back out, it's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be close. So now we'll switch over to our green channel. Switch to our green channel. And green a lot of times is one of the more important ones to get right because the way that your eye is, apparently we see green easier than most colors. I'm sure it probably has something to do with like leaves or whatever. But yeah, so green is actually really strong for your eye. So we'll want to, try to get that one as dialed in as possible. It's feeling a little bright, but let's go with that for now. And then blue, and we're going to rock over here to our blue. And blue is also a little tough because since there's so little blue in skin tones. So this one, every once in a while, I might play with the gamma on that one a little bit just to kind of get it going. But let's see, we want to bring it around. Yeah, let's touch the gamma a little bit right in there. Okay, so now we've done a little bit of tweaking to all of it. We're going to come out and see what we got. All right, so it's really purpley, not what we're really wanting. So there's a little bit too much red. So we're going to go back out here to our red, and now we can start eyeballing it and seeing what we like. There's clearly not enough blue in this one. So we're going to want to bring that back as well, because you're seeing his jacket's looking really purple. So like we can suck out even a lot more red. And let's see, we can actually probably go a little bit more red than that even. And then green, we start sucking out a little bit of that. Sucking out a little bit more red. And you just start dialing it in from there. So you're getting, his skin tone. This background shot has very little reds, very little, there's not a whole lot of warmth to it. It's kind of, it's not a skip bleach, but it's got a little bit of like the, it's got a look to it. So you want the skin tones to match that. You don't want them to be bright popping red. So, you can already see we're starting to really, this was the before. He's starting to feel like he's in the factory at this point. And that's really, the way that I treat it with levels is just kind of dial it in the different channels. And then, and then kind of eyeball it from there, because it's going to get you in the ballpark. It's going to get you close enough that you can start to see what it is. And now if we go back into our red channel, that looks like, it's a little contrasty, but that looks like a, reasonable black and white image. Same goes for, for this one, and same goes for that one. And, there are times that every once in a while, like I'll throw another, we'll reset that. And sometimes you might want to bring in, the outputs of just the black and the whites on these. Because for example, if we look at this, the black under his chin strap here, that comes in, if we look up at our info up here in an 8-bit color space, that comes in at 0020. And this over here is coming in at a 0104. So it's still a milkier color. There's a little bit going on here. This one, it's so you want to see if you can match the black points in that way. And I'm not saying match the numbers exactly, but just, this one's completely black except a splash of, blue. So you want to dive in there and see if you can move those around. But also, that being said, it feels a little milkier. So now once I brought the outputs up a little bit, or brought the black output up, white output down, we see that we're coming in more of at a 12, 12, 6. And it just feels like, even though it's different, it feels like, because we have this detail in here and we have, a little bit of color in here, it feels like it goes a little bit more. And also the white jacket doesn't seem to pop quite as much as it did. It just seems a little bit more toned down, and I would probably still suck out a little bit more of this red. But you don't want to start getting blue lips, because then he goes all zombie. But yeah, somewhere in there I think is going to get us in a ballpark. So that's the way you do it with levels. Curves is the exact same thing. It's just a different interface for it. So with curves, we're going to do the exact same thing. Hop in here. These channels can be your friend in VFX, because it's going to show you more of what's going on, like a little bit more minutely. When you're dealing with, all of the footage I'm dealing with tonight is 8-bit H.264, because that's what stock footage is a lot of times, unless you're getting really good stock footage. And Envato is not known for being great stock footage. So there's not a lot of color to deal with. So that's the reason that, you're trying to dial it in as close as you can, but it's not like with color correction where you're trying to bring out detail, you're trying to hide things. It's not that. You're just trying to make it look like it's conceivably in the same shot. And in some cases that might mean, if, for example, maybe we have a great background and, our guy was shot on an iPhone. Sometimes you might have to degrade that image a little bit. You know, we might have to back down on, you know, back out on that and kind of crud up your background a little bit, but they've got to match. But, you know, so when you're doing this color matching, you're not trying to bring out details and make it beautiful, you know, make it great. You're trying to preserve details where you can, but more importantly, you're just trying to get the black point, the white point, the colors to look similar, like we're operating in the same world. So in this one, curves, we drop into the red, and we're going to suck out a lot of red right around in there. And again, we're not going for it to be perfect. We're just kind of eyeballing it to get us in the ballpark. And we know.
DJ, while you're doing this, can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
So one of the things that I recently ran into on a job was doing some interviews for some designers, and a lot of what I was working with was multiple cameras. So usually when I'm doing color, I'm doing color in Premiere generally. I'm using Lumetri color. I use curves for the most part. And then I've got the Lumetri, the curve, not the curves, the histogram open. I'm blanking on it right now. But, you know, you're looking at that kind of overlay. You're looking at that overlay of your RGB white channel, the scopes. And would it be, like, say for an example in Premiere, would it be worth it to, like, I guess I've never really viewed the individual channels, like, between shots. Is that something that you would do when you're kind of grading between shots?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because, well, you know, really there's no difference between what we're doing here and we're, you know, between two different shots. It just, this shot happens to be on top of the other. So yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think that would be doable. And that's probably the way I would approach it. You know, if I didn't break out, you know, just some sort of, a lot of times for, you know, when I'm trying to match a shot like that, just because it's a habit from like film school days, I'll break out one of like there's formulas where you actually take the, you know, you'll pick a white point here, and then up in the info panel in the top right, you'll write down all the numbers, and then you can actually divide by 255 of the lowest number, figure out your multiplier, and you can, you know, there's equations to do it that way. And sometimes I'll start with that and do that, and then compare what I do by looking at the channels and kind of see where we're at from a white balance perspective. But if we're not going necessarily for just straight white balance, we're going for more of a stylized look, especially, you know, something like, you know, this background that is got a lot of the red sucked out of it and stuff. Yeah, I mean, absolutely, go in and check out those channels. And I mean, there's a ton, basically, you know, there's a ton of reasons to dive into channels. I would say even when you're dealing with the same camera, but just from different setups and different pieces. I mean, anytime that I do an edit, I personally dive into channels quite a bit, just, you know, and that's because that's the way I work. I mean, I'm not saying that you have to, but I think that it's a valid path to use for sure.
Yeah. Cool. That's
yeah.
good to know.
So if
I'm always kind of fighting that. So, all right, cool. Thanks.
Yeah, so if we take a quick look at what we did with channels versus curves, we'll take off curves here. We'll take off levels here. Boom. So you'll see, I mean, you know, I typically get something slightly different each time. I personally like this one, which is the one that I did with levels. Like I said, I like using levels more. But I think if, you know, we were going to play with it, you'd suck out a little bit more of that red, which is kind of what we found ourselves doing a lot anyway. And maybe suck out a little bit more of that blue. The blue is looking a little hefty. So, yeah, you know, they're looking pretty close. I would throw that same levels that I did on here just to adjust the white and black points. Because really, like, in my opinion, the white and the black points are kind of the most important. You're going to find yourself, you know, a lot. And I think it goes back to like the way the eye works. We see contrast from white to black really well. And so you're going to see differences in that. But in this case, I think you can see that I also still have too much green in my curves, but you know, that's going to get you, you know, pretty close on your color matching. I use levels, but they do the exact same thing. It's just a different interface and kind of a different way of looking at it. And I know a lot of people, particularly from what I've seen, like guys, people who come from editing, kind of prefer channels. I think it's similar to how they've done color correcting in Premiere for a while, without the little, knobs and things.
Hey, DJ.
Yeah.
So somebody named Bubba, who I'm going to assume is Wayne, just because I know Wayne, and I'm assuming that's him. If you were trying to match the two pieces of video, wouldn't you also downgrade the resolution of the foreground? And if so, what effect would you apply?
If we're going to match, you mean because, sorry, so because the dude here is, are we talking about these pieces of footage, or just in general, if your foreground is if your foreground is in better quality than your background, you mean?
I think so. Wayne, if you want to chime in, you can clarify.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm noticing the video in the background's a little bit, soft on the sides, and it's not, and so I'm wondering, okay, well, and I've had this problem before. It's like when you do a chroma key and the foreground video is so sharp and crisp and clean compared to the background, going, I need to soften up the foreground. I mean, just put a blur on it. What would you do to try and downgrade the foreground so the two pieces of video match better? Sure.
So let's just say, I mean, let's go ahead and degrade this a little bit. Well,
that's already degraded. I was going to degrade him.
Yeah, no, I want to do it a little bit more, so even just to kind of make the point. So, because I don't know how clear I'm coming through. So let's say that we're coming in somewhere around here. Okay, so now you've got pretty strong blurring on the edges. You've got a good deal of chromatic aberration. You can easily, do that same kind of thing. And actually, I guess I kind of gave it away. I prefer the chromatic aberration plugin, only because in Universe, only because you can go in and it's really, really customizable. So it's not I actually barely use it for chromatic aberration.
Okay, well, I don't have Red Giant.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
So just to the what would you apply just using one of the standard Adobe effects?
Yeah, I think one thing you could kind of play with is, let's see, we could play around with a displacement map. Throw a displacement map that's gonna have a, let's see.
What is a displacement map?
So a displacement map is it's a height map that says basically pixels here in accordance with luminance or with hue or whatever. It displaces along in accordance with a layer's, and in this case, luminance. So here, I think I can show you better than I can describe. So let's make one really quick. We're gonna make a fast box blur. Boom.
I have to say, it sounded like you were reading that from something, by the way.
No, unfortunately, I wish I was. I'm not always the best at coming up with stuff, but let's see. Yeah. So we've got our guy here, and we're gonna just type in displacement map. All right. So displacement map, change it to luminance, and I don't know how great this is gonna come out. I'm gonna change off his color stuff just to make it easier. Make sure that that's off. Boom. Okay. So now we want to displace. We start. There we go. So what it's doing currently is it's displacing the X and the Y along the, ooh, there's his head. Okay, or along the, with the luminance. So this is your horizontal displacement. So it's looking at this layer right here. And it is saying that where white is affected the most, where black is affected the least.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean that the perspective of the two shots didn't match. I meant the quality of the image. The image in the foreground was sharper than the image in the background.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, I thought we were talking about like a lens distortion kind of thing, because I was going to go there, or I was going to go optics compensation. Okay, so yeah, so for that, a lot of times I'll just throw on a fast box blur.
Fast box, what?
Fast box blur. Fast box blur was what replaced the fast blur. It's just the most basic of the blurs. And I'll typically, you can jump in and, you know, let's put it in at 0.3. Sometimes it's, you know, you can go as high as 3 pixels. Kind of depends on the, you know, on the footage that you're actually working with. But I never go more than 3 pixels, even on like 4K, unless it's really janky footage. Typically, you're going to be good around 1. Like this is with 1 pixel of blur on it.
I mean, for decades I've been using Gaussian blur, so I don't really deviate from that. So what's the difference between that and what is fast box blur?
So Gaussian blur, I believe. Let me make sure before I tell you something wrong. So yeah, Gaussian blur. Okay, I thought that it was EOL'd. It's not. So the way that it blurs things, it's not as good. And I mean, I can't, beyond that, I can't tell you like why. I can't tell you what the algorithm is to blur it. But, you know, let's take a quick look.
DJ, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So could you do, what are the chances of doing a blur where you select the edges and run it like a vignette so it doesn't blur the entire images, but it blurs, you know, where you could set the parameters and go like, you know, 50 pixels in and have it be a moving mask. It's vignetted as a blur, a transparent, you know, an alpha blur.
Yeah, I mean, you can, okay, there's that. You can do that.
How would you do that?
Yeah, let's take
Or is it even possible to do?
No, it is possible. Let me get this, answer the blur situation, and then we'll address that. Okay, so fast blur is here. Gaussian blur, like you got to crank on it, and eventually, like, you know, this is already at a 239 versus 72. You know, they're going to be largely the same, particularly when you get, you know, a solid, but it's just generally the fast box blur. I think it renders quicker, hence the fast, and it's just kind of a little bit smoother. The way that it actually blurs things. Let me pull in an image real quick. Let's use that Adobe stock image from earlier and just throw it in here like this and use our fast box blur. So, and pixels. So there's that. This one is fast. And then there's Gaussian. So you'll see here, if we don't repeat pixels, there's our fast box blur. Gives us something that approximates a poor man's camera lens blur. Camera lens blur is great, but it renders so incredibly slow that I don't actually know anybody that uses it. When you switch over to Gaussian, it's just feeling a little bit more Photoshoppy, like the algorithm's just a little different. So, and like I said, I can't tell you why or what that is.
Did you switch back and forth again?
Sure. It's, right here, let's.
So fast box is on the left?
Fastbox is on the left. Gaussian here, you can see that the colors are a little bit different. Like it changes. There's a little bit of color change to it. The outline here, and I don't know how much of it's actually showing up, like through Zoom, but like here, it's a really soft fall off, and it's a little bit harder here. I mean, it almost is done right here, whereas here we kind of drift away. And you have more color change between like this section, and this is, you know, this is coming in at 90, 193, 2.5. And this is coming in, you know, in the lighter range of the piece. So, yeah, I mean, you know, I know that's not an incredibly satisfying answer just because it is algorithmic based, but
that's what you would do to degrade the image to make it the two images to kind of match each other. If you were to kind of.
Yeah, typically, I mean, to kind of answer, you know, to finish where I was going with the other thing was I would either use a displacement map, which might take a little bit of time, or I would go back and the other thing I might do to match him would be optics compensation. And sometimes you can get a good effect with this and sometimes you can't. You reverse and then you start kind of cranking on him. And there we go. and you're gonna have to move where the origin point is, but you can see that now, it's way overdone, but you can, start to stretch him out along with the lens.
Right.
So between that and a little bit of fast blocks blur, you're gonna, degrade it pretty well. So that's typically what I do there. The one thing, I actually know a guy who would render stuff into H.264 to get it to degrade. Similar to how you always want to use the same camera to shoot, he decided that he would always want to use the same piece to edit, and that is a horrible idea. So don't do that. But yeah, between just a basic like fast box blur and optics compensation, like that's going to be your fastest and your easiest to kind of get there.
Right.
Yeah.
I will say this too, Wayne. If you were really curious about why use that one over Gaussian blur, I've actually found an article that kind of gives a little bit of difference why you would use fast box blur over the Gaussian blur. Basically, it's a faster blur. It doesn't degrade some color. There's some other issues with it. But if you're really curious, I can send you this link. If somebody that's you might not know the name, but Stu Masterwitz is a pretty knowledgeable guy when it comes to After Effects and visual effects and things like that. And he recommends using the fast box blur as well. So if you're really curious, let me know and I'll send you that link.
I'm always whatever speeds up the workflow for sure.
Yeah. No, it's
then you definitely want the fast box blur and not the Gaussian blur.
Yeah. And really fast box blur is pretty much the only one that I ever really use. Because it is so much faster. There's, you've got quite a few in there. But camera lens blur looks great, but it's, every once in a while I might use like directional or something if it's a very specific situation. But yeah, man, fast box blur, that's where it's at. So to answer Marshall's question, so let's say that we wanted only to have our blur out here. So all I've done so far was I threw a fast blur on it, and then I just made a simple mask. So then you can come down in effects on your timeline, fast box blur, compositing options, and you just hit the plus, and you can choose it to be masked with the mask. And then you can control it there with the mask settings. So let's say that we wanted to throw an invert on it. We wanted to feather it a little bit.
DJ, I was thinking about trying to put him right on the guy's body and have it be in motion. So it would be a key, but have it key like a vignette on the outside of his body, which usually you want to keep some detail. Maybe you want to have a little bit of blur in the middle, but you want it to be softer out in the edges, like out on his shoulders, and but it wants to be a mask on him, and then it would be
gotcha. Yeah,
usually like a 25 to 50 pixel.
Gotcha. Okay,
like
sorry, I thought you meant here. Yeah.
But a blurring vignette. Yeah.
So actually, we're gonna get there. That's in. Yeah, we can actually move in that direction now. So that's.
Always wanted to do that.
Yeah, that's something that's approximating a light wrap. Good, because we're actually going to go over how to do that. So that makes me happy. All right. So that's the color match. So I'm not going to dive too hard into keying since we've done keying. We just had that big meeting last year that was all about keying. But I wanted to kind of give a little bit of updates because the way that I key is a little different than then. I've simplified a lot of my process. I always like key light. I figure it comes with it. And, it did win an Oscar for, the Attack Oscar. So it's pretty well, there's a lot going on in there. And I think it, sometimes gets a bad rap. So, but I've actually figured out a lot of the problems with it and simplified my process. So let's say that we've got this dude. We want to put him running outside in China because that's something that you can't go shoot right now. So we go in, we throw on key light. All right, so Wayne might appreciate this because the last time I told you how to tweak every setting just to get it perfect. Well, since then I read up a little bit more on the actual way that key light renders things and what some of the pieces mean. And what I told you before totally works. It will absolutely work. I think that this is an approach that might be able to save you some time though. And it's kind of the way I'm doing things now. So I only really touch about four settings in here. First is you're going to take your eyedropper, get it close to the guy. And before I even do that, a lot of times, draw your garbage matte, because the less pixels you're working with, the better it's going to be. You don't want to sit here and have to worry about getting rid of stuff that's way out over here. That doesn't matter. So in the entirety of our footage, he never goes outside this, and it's just a quick mask so that we're shrinking what we're working with. All right, so I chose my area and got my green. Now this again is one of those, it's from Envato. This one's H.264, and it's really, really, really compressed. I mean, it looks really junky up in here, and that's going to cause some issues for us later. I mean, you can see there is no end to his chin. There's kind of a halo out here. Basically everything from about here in is somewhat, so it's pretty nasty. So we've got that. We select our green. All right. I don't touch screen gain anymore. Screen balance, I change it, but I change it to one of 3 settings. I either leave it at 50-50, I change it to 5, or I change it to 95. So what screen balance does is it's actually balancing the green between the red and the blue. So when it's at 5, it's much, much, much closer to either red or blue. We don't know because it's the way that it calculates the old image, but it's closer to one of the two, or we change it to 95. Okay. Don't worry that he just turned pink. That's actually not that big of a deal. I still go in here, and I told you to check out your status. Status is still where it's at, so we change it to 5. That keeps us a solid part in here. It's got solid sections, but there's a lot more gray. We change it to 50, a little better. Change it to 95. All right, that actually gets rid of more of the black in here. I mean, more of the gray. So remember, in status view, black means transparent. White means 100% opacity. Gray means somewhere between those two. It might be 1% opacity. It might be 99% opacity. So we can hop over into our final result here and see, okay, he's got, the pink thing going on. You can see a little bit of chunk in here, so let's say these are probably 10%, opaque. This is going to be in the 90%, so that's fine. So we go into status. All right. The next thing we touch, clip black and clip white. These are the only other 2 pieces that we're going to touch. Okay. You want to keep these as far apart as you can, because that's going to help you retain the most of your data. So let's try, you never want to go with clip black. You never want to go much past 15 if you can. So let's check out 15, and that gets us a long way there. If you can go lower, let's try 10. Let's try 10 for now. Clip, and all that's saying is all those pieces that were around in here that were under 10% opacity, get rid of those. Okay, so gets rid of that. Now clip white. Clip white's going to be the same thing. Everything that's if we set it to 90, everything that's 90% above, turn it to 100, and it's stretching that contrast and kind of filling in some of those holes. So let's check 90. All right. Now we get a lot of green now. So the green is stuff that's being color corrected by Keylight, which Keylight is not a great color corrector, as you can see. But that's fine. It doesn't have to be. So let's go back to 15. I think we were getting slightly better edges with that. And the thing that maybe the most controversial thing I do is I don't let it render the final result, because final result includes the color correction, includes a lot of other stuff, includes these inside mask, outside masks, all this stuff down here that you actually don't want to deal with, because there's better ways to accomplish it. So down here, change it to intermediate result. Intermediate result gives you the same matte that we're seeing in status, the same matte that you see in combined matte, but it's not doing the color correction. It's not doing some of the other pieces. So it renders some of this junk useless, but you're not going to use that anyway. That's fine. Okay, so we've got a little bit of a green halo around him because of what we said before. It's really compressed, and also because we're being pretty light on the touch with some of our effects. And actually, I think we could even bring this down. Let's try about 85. Yeah, something like that. Okay. The next thing we're going to use is Advanced Spill Suppressor. Cool. Down here, you'll see a preset that comes shipped with it. key light, key cleaner, and advanced spill suppressor. You can use that. It's basically setting up what I use a lot of times anyway. The only thing I would say is be careful with key cleaner, because as you can see, it can get a little chunky sometimes and add in, you know, it adds back stuff that you may not want. So see, key cleaner. See, it's actually giving us more of our blue, which is more of our green back in this case, because what it's trying to do is it's trying to fill in where artifacting is an issue, where compression is causing an issue. Since this is so compressed, we're actually not getting a whole lot of the gray in our matte. So you go over here to status, you're not getting a whole lot of, or sorry, combined matte. There we go. You're not getting a whole lot of the fall off here. And that's not great. And that's just it from it being a compressed piece. There's, you know, it's kind of a mess. So we go back over, turn on our spill suppression. Spill suppression is just getting rid of the green. So if you turn off your key light and just do the advanced spill suppression, that's what it does. Gets rid of all the green. In this shot, we don't need key cleaner, but we do have this kind of nasty outline. And this is where we get into, you know, like why you don't want to do stuff with H.264, because what I'm about to show you, not a great idea most of the time, but it's going to be the fastest way, and it's going to be the cleanest way of just getting it to look good. And that's just throw a simple choker on there, and it's just going to bring it in just a little bit. So I mean, undoubtedly we are missing a little bit of this in here. You know, you'll look, actually very little, but you can see just a little bit of his hair right here is, you know, but with the compression that we have, it pulls it back. You don't have that gray outline. So we're doing better. Then we're going to go into levels, because we got to mix this guy back down. And we're going to do the whole levels thing again.
Hey, DJ, there was one quick question about how you were pulling stuff up, your little quick search thing there.
Oh yeah, so it's like the best thing ever. Okay, so if you go to videocopilot.net, which I'm sure we've all been to 1,000 times, Andrew Kramer wrote a plugin called FX Console. FX Console, it keeps you from having to go up here to do all this stuff. And, you know, I actually don't know where half the stuff I use is up here anymore. All you do is you select the layer you want, you press Control Space, and you can take a snapshot. You can go in, it's got a gallery. You can export different things. You can set up, and I don't use this too much only because I work on too many different computers for it to be 100% useful, but you can set your own keyboard shortcuts that bring up, for example, you know, if you go and add a fill, you know, it's always going to default to red, but you can set it to always default to whatever color you want it to be. You know, you can set up a lot of your own presets and stuff using that. I typically don't do it within FX Console only for transport reasons. It's easier to save them as files.
Where did you get FX Console from?
Videocopilot.net, and it's awesome. You go there. It's under downloads. It's free, and like every time I install After Effects, it's the first thing I do. I can barely use the program without it. I mean, it's just because it's so convenient. If you're not able to, for whatever reason, if your company doesn't let you install stuff on there, you can always just go over to effects. Where is it? Oh, I'm way up here. You just go to Window, Effects, and Presets, and you can just search for stuff up here. So, you know, you'd look for fill or whatever, and it's going to, you know, bring up all the presets and all the pieces that have it. So it's the same thing. It's just up here. It's not as convenient as just pressing the Control Space, and it's super great. And it's also got a interface that's dockable right here. So it's great. You can take a quick snapshot, puts it in your documents folder. It's awesome. Get it, use it. It's great. So yeah, we're just doing the quick color correct on this guy. Same kind of thing. We go to red. That one's looking okay. Bring it down a little bit. Green, green. And then blue. And it's all the exact same that we were looking at earlier. Actually, we're gonna go here, blue, because it's a pretty blue shot. All right, it's not gonna be right, but it's gonna be closer. Actually, it's not too far off. A little bit too much red in the skin tones, and that's where I might tweak the gamma a little bit to see. He starts getting a little sickly, so we might bring the gamma down on this one. Yeah, we're starting to get there with that. So yeah. Now, this is coming into where Marshall's question was. Let's say we throw in a black solid real quick, and we're going to put in a sun because we want a sun, and it's going to be behind him. So we go up here, and this is another Video Copilot plugin. This one's optical flares. It is not free, but it is worth every penny. That said, if you don't have it, it's fine too. I mean, it's not a required, but it's pretty great. So, okay, so we throw in our sun right there. All right, now we've got a problem that without this actually looks like this could be the photo. That looks reasonable to me. You know, it's a little blown out, but you know, fine. But the problem is when you put them in front of it, that's just not how it reacts. And Marshall brought up the good point of, you know, he wants a little bit of that vignetting. It's called light wrap. So how do you build a light wrap? So we're going to go over here, and we are going to pre-comp our entire background. All right. Now we're going to duplicate it and bring it above him. And we're going to bring back our old friend set matte. Okay. Now, a lot of times you would want to throw a blur on it, and we'll do it just to be demonstrative. The first thing you'd want to do is set a blur. Since this is already blurry, you don't have too much of an issue. But if you don't blur your background, you're going to get into a situation to where you're going to have the windows of the Shanghai Pearl Tower are perfectly in focus on something that it shouldn't be. Because what we're really trying to show is just the way that light wraps around something. So if if you were to stand in front of a light and we were to take a picture, that you're going to see a little bit of that light on your arm, where it's bouncing around and those photons are doing stuff. So you don't want it to be in focus. So that's the reason we throw a blur on there. So to be demonstrative, we'll do it again, just because it's good. So okay, so now we've got our set matte. We're going to change our matte to Young Man Runs, and we're going to shy that. We want to only see this. And we're going to invert matte off a channel. Make sure he's the right size. Boom, boom, everything right size, right size, right size. Okay. And let me check one thing. Set matte. Okay.
And I will just, while he's doing that, just back up his thing, his statement about optical flares, or yeah, whatever. It's really good. And if you need flares, and if you do use any kind of lens flares, it is well worth the money. I use it all the time. The flare stuff, the lens flare stuff inside After Effects is good, but what you get with that plugin is just amazing.
Yeah, it's really everything that they do. Video Copilot does is pretty amazing. So yeah, so the mistake I was making was always make sure that you're clicking effects and masks. So I was trying to do something, what I was doing here was looking at this before we did all of our key light work. So always make sure that you're working with effects and masks. All right, so then we're gonna wanna come into channel blur. Channel blur, and we're gonna change the alpha. We're gonna ramp that to like 20 or so, okay? Now we're going to duplicate our set matte and uninvert it. All right. Now that's given us a good kind of halo around it. We're just going to, I like to add that back, unshine it. Remember how I showed you earlier that set matte does not, since it's an effect, it does it before the transformations like the blurs and the other pieces. So that's what we're running into here. So we're gonna leave on that. And we're gonna, nope. So what we're gonna do is I've got a little bit of an animate on this dude. I'm gonna take that off. And we're gonna move all that. Boom. There we go. And now we can, and all I'm doing is pre-comping it with the position transformations on it. And we're going to parent that and then boom. And then we're going to back off on that opacity to like 15%. Not that opacity, this opacity, the opacity of the light wrap to like 15, a little bit more than that. But yeah, so we're getting a little bit, there we go. So now he actually feels like he's standing in front of the light. So there's our light wrap before, after. Now that's probably too much because down here, you know, it's not as needed. But if you see the light wrap, a lot of times it's too much. But again, not knowing how much is coming through Zoom, how compressed it's being, I think that's at least going to be visible. So yeah, just to clarify that again, you're going to blur it. If your background's already blurred, not as important, then you're going to set matte. That set matte, the first set matte is going to be to get the background, okay? So basically you're punching out your guy here. Then you're going to blur the alpha so that it starts to bleed onto him. Then you're going to do the set matte again. That second set matte is cutting him out again. So all you're left with is what you used, the blur from the alpha. It's to bleed onto him. Then you're going to do the set matte again. That second set matte is cutting him out again. So all you're left with is what you used, the blur from the alpha. It's to bleed onto him. Then you're going to do the set matte again. That second set matte is cutting him out again. So all you're left with is what you used, the blur from the alpha. That's weird. Okay. But yeah, so this, what you're left with is the second, you know, is just what you blurred into his piece. And then you just overlay that on top of him. Like I said, I use add, some people use screen. Screen, you know, it is more subtle. But, you know, use either. But yeah, so this, what you're left with is the second, you know, is just what you blurred into his piece. And then you just overlay that on top of it. Does that, add, some people use screen. Screen, you know. Is someone else hearing me say things again?
Yeah, I like that guy. He seems to know a lot more.
Yeah, he seems.
Yeah, I am hearing that.
Okay.
Someone's
Yeah,
someone's microphone on?
Not mine. Well, they'll just turn it on now. I'll turn it off again.
That's fine. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't something on my end. So yeah, so does Marshall, did that answer your question kind of about the vignette that kind of follows him?
Yeah, it was a good, I mean, it wasn't exactly what I was, you know, sometimes we're trying to composite people into shots that aren't on green screen, but particularly if they're shot on white. And we did this a lot in photography too, where we wanted a really high resolution compositing that was very, very believable. And once you're looking at a still and you're staring at one frame on a, you know, a page for the whole time, or a billboard, or, well, billboard's not a good example, but a high resolution situation, we found we wanted to mat it, run a vignette that was just a focus vignette, and soften the edges in a controlled sort of way. And that definitely is what you're talking about here.
Well, so to be able to even take that a step further, let's say that we don't want to use this as a, let's go ahead and get rid of a few things so we can see it better. So now, you know, this doesn't necessarily have to be a light wrap. It could be a track matte. So we could easily, you know, say, let's take a adjustment layer with a fill, or let's say big blur. Fast blur. There we go. And let's just crank it really high. Okay. Now we can use, and we set that to alpha matte. Now when you get in there, you can start to see, I don't know how well it's showing, but you can start to see that it's starting to blur within this, but just within where our set matte is. And that set matte, you know, is pretty, there we go. So we're actually using what, you know, was originally our light wrap layer. We're using that as a track matte. And here I can something that's a little bit more obvious. So here's our black layer. We change that to alpha. Boom. So now, you know, that is being overlaid on top of our piece. So we're actually using our light wrap as a track mat, if that makes sense. So that you could use it for blurs, you could use it for color adjustments, you could use it for, you know, various things.
That's very cool.
Okay, cool. All right, so there's color. Okay, yeah, if everyone's good, we'll switch over to Roto Brush. So yeah, Roto Brush is, I remember when they came out with it, it seemed awesome. It was going to save everybody like tons of time. And then we all used Roto Brush, and some people liked it. I actually liked it a little. But the problem that I found was that I would end up getting, you know, for a 5-second shot, I'd end up with 300 strokes. And it kind of became one of those things where I wasn't sure if I was using Roto Brush because it was the best tool, or if because I spent so much time trying to get the shot right in Roto Brush that I felt like I need to go ahead and finish it in Roto Brush. Because that's the, you know, that's the best way. You know, you'd start thinking this is a good chance. So I've been working to kind of figure out, and, you know, talking to other people, just where does, like, what's it good at and what's it bad at, and, you know, why. So I found two things that Roto Brush is awesome at. The first is these like little fine details like hair and fur, and the other is any place where there's a lot of high contrast. So if you want to take, you know, a picture of a wall, it's got a black picture frame on it, and you want to get that out, Roto Brush is with your jam. If it's a, you know, black frame on a white picture or on a white wall, that's awesome. High contrast, really easy. The other place, and this is actually where it's going to save you, because, you know, I remember Walter at some point, I don't know if he's on the call, was talking about how he had to work with a lion and how's he going to do this. And, you know, I kind of threw Roto Brush out there. But I didn't at that point realize how incredibly good it is with fur and hair and that kind of thing. So I don't know if anyone's ever, you know, how many of you have used Roto Brush. So we'll go over it really quick. So all we're doing here is we're going to put this yak in front of Shanghai. So it's up here. It's Roto Brush. It opens a tool. So you actually double click it to open it in your layer when you don't want it in your comp window. And kind of center it up. Control click, resizes your brush. And you don't have to be clean with it. You know, just get something along those lines. And that pink is going to show you, right now the pink is still in the shot. So we're just being junky with it. And that gets us pretty well there. So just to hop over into our, that's what it looks like currently. Okay. Then we'll do right there too. Okay. So then when you double click on it, or, you know, hit Alt W, you can click on, there's Roto Brush and Refine Edge tool. Refine Edge tool is kind of where the magic happens. So you're going to get your brush, you're just going to go over the edge. And give it a second. All right. And all of that white is now, this is your alpha. So all that detail is going to come back across. So we go back over. Boom. And like, you're not gonna, I mean, that's not shot on a green screen. That's not shot on, you know, like, you're not gonna get that with channels. You're not gonna get that with any, like, it's just on a yellow, not sure what I think. It's just on like grass. I did a spill suppressor when I was testing this out earlier, but you know, that's there. So the one thing that you're gonna notice is down here on your timeline, you're gonna get a blue dot with tiny little black arrows pointing out in both directions. So if you come down here and you see that it breaks or whatever, and you add a stroke, it's going to affect everything going right. So in the direction of the arrows. So any changes you make propagate in the direction of the arrows leaving from that frame. Does that make sense? I think it does. Okay. So yeah.
I didn't get that. Try just.
Yeah. So, okay. So right now, like, I go back in and I turn Roto Brush back on. All right. Every time I make a stroke, it's going to propagate in the direction of the arrows from the frame that I'm on. So since the frame that I'm on it's the first frame, it has arrows going left and right on the timeline. So it's going to propagate in both directions. I think a default of 14 frames, but don't quote me on that. So now that stroke works in both directions on the timeline. So it goes from frame 420, whatever I'm on, to 513-ish. It also goes out to 4. So let's say we come down here and we want to, or better yet, we come down here to the end and we need a little bit more of it, but now it's gone. So what we'd want to do is we'd want to go 1 frame earlier. And we can adjust it. Takes a second. So Roto Brush, it's CPU, so it can be pretty intensive. Particularly, if your CPU is not great, but since they don't offer, multiple core processing. But if we were
saying something on your box, DJ,
huh?
So that's really saying something on your box. I'm sure you're rocking a.
Yeah, no, it's pretty good, but it's got a bunch of junk going on right now. But with that being said, I noticed that I was having some issues earlier when Eric and I tested it. Roto Brush was the one thing that didn't play well with Zoom. So, but let's say that I were to add a stroke here. Since the arrows at this frame are going toward the end of the frame, it's only going to add, like that change is only going to propagate this way. So it's only going to affect what comes after it.
Gotcha.
So it won't affect, it's not going to overwrite anything. But if I see my area start to break, I need to find that first frame that it breaks. Because if I fix it on frame 3 of the break, I've got to still go back and get frames 1 and 2. Like I'm not doing myself any favors. So that's the important thing. And you can drag it out. So like at this point, now I've drug it out so that these few that I have done, the few brush strokes I have done, are now propagated through the entire piece. But if the yak turns or if it breaks for whatever reason, a lot of times another yak might come in here and it starts to bring it in. That's when you're going to get problems. But we see that looks pretty good. I mean, that's doing all right. You weren't going to be able to get that out. And since it was on green, this is what I was playing with earlier. If you want to throw a little bit of advanced spill suppressor on it, boom. Now you don't have any of that green that was being cast from the farm that was on it. So a nice little effect. And that's going to play. The one thing that you should always do when you are using Roto Brush is once you get it looking like you want, you're going to want to, come down here and click freeze. It's going to pre-calculate the whole thing and it's going to run a lot faster once you get it dialed in. So yeah, always freeze it. It takes a little while. We're not going to do it now because we don't need to, but freezing will pre-calculate your whole piece and it's going to help you look at stuff a lot faster. So there's that. You can do, I kind of did the same thing over here with this thing. This one's got it's got a little bit more going on in the background than that one does, but it's pretty much the same process. You paint down. Oh, got to change. So you'll see down here, it has to be the same. The comp has to be the same frame rate as the source. So I'm actually have competing pieces here. And that's just because, again, Envato has like that. Let's try it again. There we go. There we go. And then you'll see if we come in here to, I'm not going to go too hard into it because we already did it, but if you refine that brush again, I mean, that's looking pretty good. And if you have any problem, you can always go into decontaminate. And this is without the advanced spill suppression. You can play with like the decontamination. I don't bother with it. I think there's better things for it. But you can, there's ways that you can crank on to smooth out, because every once in a while you'll get some chatter on, it looks like there would be some chatter on this one. So you can kind of play with your contrast of the edges and on the mat and, really dial it. Yeah, there we go. That way, so with our, what I'm doing is I'm changing the contrast of the mat. So right now we have a whole bunch of stuff. If we dive into our channel view, which is, there we go. Here's our alpha view. We're seeing just a bunch of junk out here. That's not fur. It's just kind of compression artifacts and just junk. So in this case, we just bump up the contrast a little bit. And this is the same as those input black and whites on Keylight. It's just kind of crushing that out so that we can see what we're actually trying to see. And there we go. And that looks real nice for the people. And then we jump back over here and boom. I mean, that's, again, you're not going to get that level of niceness easily with a lot of things. So Roto Brush has totally got its place. Don't tempt me, Wayne. All my quarantine beer turned out to be some low carb Corona, so I screwed up. but yeah, so Roto Brush, it's all right. So that's kind of like the pieces that I was planning on going over within, like that are built into After Effects, that like ship with After Effects. Are there any questions before I move on to anything else?
That's pretty awesome. Thank you.
Cool. Okay, let's close out some stuff real fast, and because there are two plugins that are pretty new that I wanted to go over. One does stuff that was really hard to do, and then there's a toolkit that just makes things a lot easier. So the first thing that I guess we'll talk about is the Red Giant VFX toolkit. So it came out in July. They also included it in part of Red Giant Complete. I've used it a little bit. I've had it since they came out with it. I've used it a little bit. It's one of those that, I was telling a guy the other day, I think that it's really good. And if you start using it, I think it's a great, it's a really good way to make stuff. Problem is I have a way to do so many of the things it does. I actually just kind of find myself, it's easier just to do it that way than to relearn the whole system. That being said, it makes a lot of things a lot more straightforward. So it's mostly made up of, the big one is Super Comp. Let's see, Super Comp is its big, kind of big selling point, but it also comes with chromatic displacement. Kingpin Tracker is a Mocha alternative, which I'll honestly say I've never used. Knoll Light Factory is similar to optical flares. John Knoll was this famous guy who came up with these a collection of lens flares that is what started Red Giant. So they're really good. Optical Glow. I guess let's start with Optical Glow, just because this is similar to kind of some of the stuff that we were talking about. So I think we've all used Glow before, that comes with After Effects. Yeah, that doesn't really look like anything. It just kind of looks like a blur that's been kind of put over it. And it's got these settings that don't make a whole lot of sense, about glow threshold and that kind of thing. You can get some okay effects with it, but with the Optical Glow, you turn it on, and its big selling point is it has inverse fall off, so the light actually falls off the way a light does from a lamp, and it's going to get you some just cooler effects. Like it just acts more like a neon light does. So, I mean, I like it way more. I actually there's a few plugins that do this that you can get separately. Like if this is all, if you watch this thing on, the VFX toolkit and you're like, everything in that sucks except Optical Glow, you can get Deep Glow. You can get, there's a few others. There's Real Glow, both in AE scripts. They're for like $25. But it's, it's just a little bit nicer of a, it's the big thing, again, inverse fall off. It's physically accurate. So it looks like how we want glows to look. Going back over to our Roto Brush real quick. Another thing that's in the toolkit is a piece called Shadow. So if I were going to make a shadow for this dude, the seal, in the old days, I'd go in, I'd make a solid, I'd make a little mask, boom, 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 boom. And then I'd adjust that. And this sucks. And it's going to get me there. I mean, and then we take and we feather that. And that, that starts to get there. I could do better if if I was taking more time with it, but yeah. So there we've got kind of a shadow. But now with this, we can go in, shadow, boom. And what shadow does is it's going to give you a physically accurate, physically accurate shadow in accordance with a plane. So we can set the bottom, and then so you can already start to see, and there's our shadow. I mean, you can see it here. There it is, and it's starting to lay out, so we can play it there. And you don't want to count. There we go. We can go over here and soften it up a bit. And you're going to see, like, that was, for one, way less clicks, but also way juicier. Like, that just looks better than the piece I did. And you can continually move it around. This is animatable, so if your light sources are moving, you can do it that way. You can tighten it up. Ooh, grab the wrong thing. So there's, we chugging. There we go. But yeah, so you can kind of shape it, but that's going to get you a lot cooler looking shadow. And actually, this is the piece that I've probably used the most because it's a lot faster and it gets you don't have to worry about the physics of the seal and that kind of thing. So I dig it. I think it's kind of cool. But diving back in over here, reflection is similar. I didn't really have anything that made it look awesome. But it's similar to to the shadow, only with reflections. There's Primac here. We've all done Primac here before, so we won't go into it too hard, but I will touch on it for a second. This is the one piece. This is the chromatic displacement. So got this little girl, she's a fairy. I'm going to turn off chromatic displacement. So what I've done here is this is kind of what I was going into with displacement maps. This is a different kind of displacement map. All I have here was I created a solid, I put turbulent noise on it, and I made a sphere. That's all I've done. These are the stock settings. I moved it around a little bit. So then we come over here. We want to put on chromatic displacement. This is if we want to put a little girl in a bubble. Displacement amount, we crank that up. First, we want to point it to our sphere, and then we want to crank it up, and you got her in a bubble. And it's kind of this, nice little look, but you can soften this displacement a little bit and kind of get this cool lens effect. You can change that up a little bit, and all this is doing is it's using the black and white here to drive these ripples. So if I went in here to our sphere, changed our brightness, made it darker. Let's transform, let's scale this up a bit. There we go. There we go. So we can start to get kind of a weird, like she's floating in a bubble. And all of that's keyframeable so that if she, if we were doing this, we could actually track it with her. We could have the black and white move. We could have, all of that move around, and we could have her being in our bubble. So kind of a fun little effect. Not found a use for it in a professional way, but I love doing it just because it's cool. So, and the way that differs real fast from a typical displacement that we were talking about earlier is you kind of get a cool chroma thing, and it's, let's see, luminance. It just handles things a little differently so that, sphere. Yeah. So, it's handling it in a way that it just doesn't, it kind of looks like a sphere. It's kind of giving you that shimmery thing, but it's not as glassy. It's not giving you that chromatic spread, and it's you can't make it look like a bubble. And you don't have to. You can turn it so that there's no chromatic spread. All right. So there's that. Super comp. All right. The big guns.
Hey, DJ, can you go back to that effect for a second?
Yeah.
What happens if you try and render out a few frames? Can we see what actually happens during mode?
Yeah, so these are actually, so everything in the VFX is actually GPU rendered. So it's actually really fast. Like, it doesn't have the same issues as RotoBrush does. Like, let me dial this back a little bit.
Because without the motion part, you're just showing me Photoshop effects.
Sure, sure. Let's see. There we go.
That's very cool, though.
Yeah. Let's see, and then we can. We want to have it. Boom. Boom. Set this to reset just to get it a little nice again. Boom. There we go. And then, so yeah. So all that moves. I've keyframed the bubble to follow her a little bit, but you know, it is what it is on that. And I mean, this is rendering with, you know, the pieces, like it's going pretty, you know, it's going pretty quick to be, you know, doing it for a displacement map. Like they're not known to be particularly quick. So, I mean, because this is actually slow-mo footage anyway. But yeah. So you could easily, if we would set up a tracking point like on her waist, you could easily have it track and, you know, she could be in the bubble. You know, for a long time. Because, yeah, I mean, this, you know, this whole jump here, I mean, takes 16 seconds. So maybe not the most, well, here, let's time remap it. There we go. And the bubble's slowly drifting over the course of period times. So there's that. Cool. So the next piece that we have, and this is kind of the big selling point of VFX Toolkit. I mean, all those others are nice, but they're essentially kind of just things that you'd see, you know, similar to what you'd see in Universe. Super Comp is kind of the big boy. So first thing you get, got this dude clapping. The scene here I built doesn't make any sense, so just go with me on it. But Primat, which comes with it, and I'll show you a super quick keying in Primat. Looks like that, boom, auto-define key. There we go. So that did 90% of our work. Just because this is also another one that I think this one's actually scaled up quite a bit. Yeah, this one's scaled up quite a bit. I'm just going to do a simple choker because we don't need to go into keying all over again. So got that. All right. So what Super Comp does is you've got all these assets together. You know, we've got a dusted camera. We've got this dude clapping. We've got another little dust explosion, a fireball. There's the industrial rubble. I took another little pterodactyl. There's a robot back here. And then I did extract on this for the sky with illuminance just to be able to put this pterodactyl and the robot behind him. All right. So I'm going to select our little dude and then Super Comp. All right, so Super Comp opens and it's kind of its own little thing. Like it could be its own, you know, program, but it's not. So what you have here is you've got all your source layers, which lines up here, and then you've got your Super Comp. So let's go ahead and bring everything over and we're just going to set it back up the way that we want. I could have done this the first time if I selected everything, but I didn't. And we just kind of arrange things how we want them. And what really matters here is the way that they're arranged in Super Comp. Because what you'll see in just a second is that these down here don't entirely matter anymore. Let's see, dusty camera up here. Yeah, it looks good. Okay, so look over here. We can turn all of this off. Like Super Comp is now created this one single layer. Like these don't have any effects on them, conceivably, aside from Primat. It's all contained within the Super Comp environment. So now if you want to move, for example, if you want to move this guy, like it still responds to that. That's how you would move it. But for the most part, you know, they're doing their own thing now. Okay, so what you have here, you've got a readout of what it's going to look like, and then you've got your settings and your source layers. So we've got all our source layers in, we can hide that. All right, the first thing we're going to want to work with is, let's go ahead and hide some of these dust layers that are going to get in the way. Okay, as we've already talked about, you remember how we did light wrap? We went in, we created the set matte, channel blur, set matte. That was the way we did it. But with this, all we do is we click this little plus and we go to light wrap, boom. And it built our light wrap for us. Now I'm going to crank this up way higher than it should be to, again, prove a point. Okay, so now we see it, it's looking very hazy, okay? The cool thing is, the way that I built it was a pre-comped background. So meaning every time that you wanted to change it, you'd have to go into the background, and it's just kind of clunky, like it didn't respond to the way that you actually work. But if we want to move this, it actually is calculating the background for you. So since it's not like a pre-comp. So for example, let's say that we wanted to make a kind of greenish yellow solid. Let's go into our source layers, bring that in, and drag that behind our dude, okay? So now it's behind him. And let's just scale it to, you're gonna see that if you see the light wrap here is adjusting to that. When it's not there, you got your, it's just a little bit of brown from the plants, not a whole lot. When it's down there, so it's a lot easier way to adjust your background and get the light wrap you want without having to set up 4 different layers. It's, if you're setting up 4 different layers to do that, like it sucks, to do every time and then have to adjust it and that kind of thing. So that sucks. So that was a huge, change. All right, the next thing that's kind of glaring out at me is this pterodactyl. Remember before we lowered his opacity and that kind of helped, but there was still work to be done. Well, in this one, they've got color corrector. Color corrector is pretty good. It's something that Red Giant's good at anyway. So here you just bring up your black points a little bit, and this isn't changing his opacity. So if we had stuff back there, the problem with the way I did it was I could do that because I knew that there was nothing behind him. But if this were flying in front of a city, you'd be able to see buildings behind him, and you don't want that. So you can color correct him from there. All right. We're going to want a little bit of light wrap on our industrial city too, because let's say it's bright back there. I mean, it's not, but let's say it is. Cool. Okay, so now our robot dude. One of the things that's going to help us is if we throw on a little haze. So the haze just throws a little bit back there, throws a little bit of this on him, and it's calculating it from the background. So in this case, since it's kind of a blown out sky, it's not too much. But if we come up here and put the haze on this layer, it's also going to be calculating from the robot. So we're getting a slight variance in the color of the haze here, and it's adjusting things kind of nice. So cool. We're going to come into our fireball. So all you're doing is it's got kind of pre-built things for this. So, for the different pieces you want. So if you want the optical glow like we were looking at earlier, it's there. One thing I like to put on my explosions diffusion, but then I was playing around with this particular one and it has presets. The preset that I found that works really well with this explosion and, is the, let's see, where is it? It's not there now. Yeah. Well, works out fine. We can build it anyway. So we crank up diffusion, and all that's doing is giving a little bit of just spray outside, and it's coming forward. So it's a little bit, it's kind of like the old school glow, just giving it a little bit of, fuzziness to the camera. The next thing we're going to want to do is reverse light wrap. Reverse light wrap, instead of putting it on the foreground, it's going to put it on the background. You can see here what it's doing. So let's crank that up. Just again, I'm overdoing it. You wouldn't want to do it this big on most things, but you can see it's starting to play back on the building. It's starting to play back on the plants and that kind of thing. So that's looking nice. All right. Let's see if this is going to come through. On our little pterodactyl, let's play with a little bit of the volumetric fog. So the volumetric fog kind of creates this like let's say kind of these God rays or whatever you want to call them, the idea of a volumetric light that's being shown from behind it. So in this case, we want to change the center, and it's up here, we're getting a feedback of where it's going. So if our little pterodactyl dude were flying in front of the sun, you're going to be able to you're going to be able to give him a little bit of him blocking out that, that shadow, or blocking out that light. And that's going to kind of give him just a little bit of, atmosphericness to it. This one's not the best for that, only because it is such kind of a hazy day. Like, you're not going to get God rays on this day, but it's there. And then let's see, you want to throw haze on this as well. Just fill out anything. And that's where you're like, so what you're really able to do with this is you're really able to start building onto things. I know what I did here, so the other thing you can do is I'm going to go ahead and clear these out to show you another possibility that you can do with explosions. So up here, right now, the layer type is set to normal. These are the two blending modes. You get additive. Fire, you're going to want to do additive, and that's going to change what pops up. You're going to be able to do heat blur, and you're going to be able to do a few different things, color correction and optical glow, but it changes the presets, and the presets is what I was looking for earlier. Explosion core, so it's going to just change that. It's going to throw out, and what it does is it throws a little bit of color correction on it, throws a little bit of heat blur, a little bit of core matte, and a little bit of optical glow, so that you get that nice kind of juicy explosion. And it mixes it into the foreground, it mixes it into the background. We've got a little bit, our warp on that guy, so that's looking nice. So then we've got this dust at cam. What we want to do with the dust, so this is just if it were a dusty day where, let's say, we're in the middle of a storm. All right, so the problem is, so many times when you use things like this, and start mixing in this dust, like, this shouldn't be so crisp. I mean, it looks like an effect that's been put on it. So you can put the blur behind so that it chooses the density of the piece, the density of like whatever you're overlaying, and it affects the blurriness based on that. So if you look like where it's the thickest, let's dive in here, and I don't know how well this is showing up, but where it's the thickest, and I turn it on, it's, so up here where it's thin, it, might be only blurring at 2 pixels, but down here it's getting really swampy. And we can crank that up even more. And that's all based on the density of the alpha. So it's a blur, the blur is being driven by the density of the alpha. So if you're putting together a shot like this, and you don't have the ways that you do things, like, this is a fast way to do it. You can build nice looking stuff right away, because each of these, the problem is a light wrap is going to be 4 effects, and it's going to be clunky to use, and you're going to have to build it for each piece, and it's not going to necessarily interact with new things that you do. This light wrap automatically is looking at whatever else is brought into SuperComp. The reverse light wrap is playing everything up, that's on, in the background. It's, it's looking at all the layers and assessing it that way. Whereas when you're building it on your own, you kind of have to do that. You have to build it on your own. So that can be time consuming, that can be clunky. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Cool.
I have a question that's a little off subject. It's I spent about 45 minutes today going down a rabbit hole. We've been reading a book by one of the guys who helped start Pixar. Not Lasseter, but the business guy or the software guy.
Ed Catmull.
Ed Catmull.
Yeah. And so we just started looking at, I've never really spent a lot of time looking at RenderMan. Does anybody use it here ever? Is it way beyond? I just don't know much about it. I'm curious.
I know people that do use it. The world of like GPU rendering and the world of like third-party renderers in 3D, like, we could do a whole meeting on that. It's a messy place. I would say that RenderMan's great. I mean, they obviously use it and they do great. But from my experience with it, which is extremely limited, it's not incredibly user-friendly. And I think that
you'd have to have a server farm basically to render.
A little bit. I mean, you have to have a very solid machine. Like you can do it. Like it's, you know, it's a little overstated, particularly with the newest versions of RenderMan. Like I said, like I don't run it. I don't try to, you know, I don't try to keep it as one of my offerings. Like I try to keep Redshift and Octane and Arnold as things that I can do. RenderMan, there's a lot more to it. I mean, you know, I don't know for a fact that it could run on my system, but it's, yeah. Like I think there are more user-friendly solutions for people like us. There are cheaper and more straightforward solutions.
Okay. Good.
But it's great. I mean, it works awesome for them. So, you know.
Well, the rumor is that I've heard is it's coming for us. It is headed that direction.
Yeah, I mean, I would
planning on expanding it.
To be able to say too much, like like I said, I know a couple people that use it, but I don't know their setups. Like it's people that you casually know, not, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just curious because this is my first experience.
Yeah. So, no, there's a lot of good third-party renderers out there. I prefer Octane just because it's fast. But
that would be a good meeting.
If people are interested, sure. Just don't know. I think it's a little more niche than some of our other pieces. So that would be my only concern. But
okay. All
yeah.
right.
Probably be really deep. Be a real deep.
Yeah. It'd be pretty deep and pretty nerdy. But
all right, back on topic. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, and I you know, we're bumping up on 2 hours. I'm happy. Like, there's one more thing I was gonna show if you guys want, and if not, that's cool too. Whatever.
Let's do one more and then we'll wrap it up.
Cool. All right. So this is a different piece. It's called Lockdown. So Lockdown, you can get it at A Scripts. Last time I saw it's like $99. I don't, you know, like I said with the Red Giant thing, I don't typically like to show stuff that is an upsell from basic After Effects, but in this case, like I think it's about the best way to do it. So if you ever run into this is how you do it. So let's say that we needed to put something on our Rhino here. Rhino's walking across, and we were wanting to put a billboard on him. You know, a lot of times the example that came with the software was they show you how to put something on a shirt that someone's putting on, but this is the footage I have. So here we go.
Like make them a NASCAR. Rhino.
Yeah, exactly. Making a NASCAR Rhino. So we got a Lockdown. So something that I appreciate the Lockdown did that nobody else does is they give you, like, here's the instructions. This is your tutorial right here on how to use it. So it's a 2-part plugin. Part of it's a plugin and part of it is a script. You access your scripts by going up here, and there's tons that you can get, but I've already got it open down here. Okay, so the first part of it is pre-compose. Done. All right, so Lockdown. Step 2 is optional tracking filter. Cool. So all this did was it brings up the edges. It's going to make it easier. It could make it easier for it to track. I'm good either way. All right, 3. Command click layers to create tracking points. So we're going to come up here and we're going to create some tracking points right up in here. And I don't know if you can see them. For some reason they're blue, but there's our tracking points. You can create a few groups of them. And cool. There's our tracking points. All right. Step 4 is set up into 3 parts. You press to track points. I'm going to cancel that because I did not limit how short this is. We're only going to do 3 seconds. All right, now we press to track points. And it goes pretty quick. Now we press to track points. There we go. And it's going to track 75 frames. And all we did so far was just drag a square across it. And what it's going to be doing is it's analyzing those to see how each of those move so that we can NASCARify our Rhino. 41. It's weird. I usually make the NASCAR reference, so I appreciate that it wasn't me this time. All right. So come down here, delete backward keyframes. I'm not even going to worry about that. I'm going, actually, delete, there we go. Okay. I'm going to interpolate partial tracks because sometimes if you don't, there might be a situation to where it lost a few of these points and you might be left with 5 or 6 over here. Interpolate points, it just kind of builds what it expects the rest of it to be based on those other pieces. So if it lost one for whatever reason, if it went behind this piece, it just rebuilds that data. I found it works pretty well. All right, we're going to auto triangulate mesh. Boom. There's our mesh. We're going to apply mesh on this frame. Boom. All right. So now we are going to, we are several layers deep. Goodness me. Okay. So now I'm going to bring down our little hooligander. And we're just going to mask out.
You're giving it a tat.
Giving it a tat. There we go. See, that sounds way better than hooligander. Nope. Got too many pieces going on here. I have built myself into a hole. But what we have, see, that's what happens when you actually pre-render too many things. Down. So we're gonna recompose. Boom. Boom. And we're gonna control click. And then I had tied into my old track data of one of them that I'd pre-built. I'd opened up the wrong piece. So I'm gonna track it again. Got 10 more frames to go. I'm gonna interpolate, auto triangulate. Boom, boom. There we go. All right, now we're gonna bring our hooligander. I'm gonna hide that. Change up our blending modes, and then I didn't triangulate my mesh. Don't you love it when you get going fast?
Well, while you're doing that, I will say one thing. You mentioned John Knoll earlier.
Yes.
And I will say he is just not some guy that made lens flares. John Knoll is a legend in the visual effects world.
Well, I tried to intimate that. I probably brushed over it. But
He pioneered a lot of different work up at ILM, just to give John Knoll his due.
I mean, I said he started Red Giant.
Well, he didn't really start Red Giant, but He created the lens flares, and his brother created Photoshop.
That's crazy. Has Noel light flares gotten any better? I feel like I had Noel one time and I wasn't. I don't know. I felt like optical flares was like way more easy for me to figure out and use and get better results with.
So yes, it has gotten a little bit better. In recent versions, the GPU accelerated it, and that's made it better. It used to be a real render hog and CPU hog, but it has gotten better. And you know, I still like optical flares over it, but the only problem with optical flares is that it's only in After Effects, and if I'm in Premiere and I want to throw quick lens flares up, Noel Light Factory is in Premiere, and so I can get something quick inside Premiere that way.
I gotcha. Yeah, that I guess I have run into that with optical flares where I needed some effect, or I wanted to put something over, and I had to send the damn thing to After Effects and do it there. So that's a good point.
But I mean, this is you know, Noel Light lens. Yeah, Noel Light Factory. Yeah, I mean, it looks nice. It's not, you know, it's way better than the, you know, piece, and you can go in and customize it really well. They also have within Universe, they have a open dashboard, a bunch of presets that you can go, you know, work from for their different pieces. So
yeah, is Universe getting? I feel like it wasn't worth it the last time I looked. Would you say it's worth having? Or?
I mean, I like it. I use it for some things. There we go. There we go. I use it for some things. You know, it's part of Red Giant Complete. That's the only reason I still have it. So, regarding Lockdown, something's being goofy on it, so I'm not going to waste any more time trying to. I will put up a probably in the next day or so, since we're all stuck at home. I'll figure out what's going on with it, and I'll do a little screen thing with it. So, I apologize for that, but it's being wonky.
The Kingpin tracker inside Visual Effects Suite, which we looked at earlier, would be another great tool if you have it to use to do what DJ was trying to do. Just to throw that out there.
Well, thank you, DJ.
Yes, thank you. Awesome.
Good job, DJ.
Thanks, DJ.
Hey guys, I got a question about the interface. Just curiously, I have no idea if I'm visible or not, or if my name's visible or not. How do you do that?
You got to change your name and you're not visible, Marshall.
Where do you do
You got
that?
to turn your camera on, Marshall.
There's a little dotted set of dots in the top corner of your square, and it gives you an option to be able to rename. So what's your name right now? Eric, probably.
Well, he's got to turn his video on.
Yeah, you got to click your little red video.
Three dots.
I want to know how Mark Mason has the gas lamp background.
He's got
like
the thing on. You know, replace.
Your lower.
He's not quarantining. He's actually sitting there.
Yeah.
Go to the left-hand corner.
Stop video. Hit that button, and you can choose a virtual background. So I can have my coronavirus background up too.
Oh look! I just went to San Francisco.
Yeah, look at that.
You must have
I'm in
green
Beaver Creek.
because mine's horrible.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
All right. Well, things you learned on your first online meeting. So,
No, very cool.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you very much.
You know, my wife was doing this earlier with some coworkers because of what's happening. She's an educator, and they had a mode where anytime somebody spoke, their face popped up big. Right now, I've got one,
what's
two,
happening
three,
right now.
four. Really? I'm only seeing everybody right now.
Oh.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I'm probably popping up on your screen.
No, so maybe
Right
there's
now.
a setting on my screen I need to do.
Yeah, because I see you talking now.
So I'm popping full screen now?
Yes. Yep.
I assumed that was Jill's duty to make that work.
yeah, well,
No one's switching.
by the way, I got to fix that for next time so that, well, I guess.
Yeah, please do.
The little corner in the upper corner of your screen, right up there. There's a little thing, right?
Right there.
Still don't have it.
All right, everybody.
Still don't have it, Marshall. Oh, I see your name, Marshall.
Yeah, but I don't have
Hey,
the
your Marshall, your
video.
name's there.
I see your
Instead
name.
of video,
Go to my
stop.
settings, which I'm doing, and
You're gonna take the tape off of your. John Stamos said you shouldn't keep your tape on there because they.
That's
look
true.
at you.
That's true. All right, boys. See you later.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for
All
coming.
right.
I wish I had raffle prizes, but it would be a little bit difficult to do that in this sort of format. I'm just going to check
Wish you
the
could.
comments.
Yeah,
Yeah,
can't meet for a beer, huh?
yeah, no beer meeting. So just go off in
Damn.
your other room and drink a beer alone, and
Will do.
there you go.
I moved on to whiskey now.
All right.
Exactly.
See ya.
All right.
Great to meet
all right, everybody.
All right, everybody.
This was good doing this online. I thought
It was like it.
really positive.
It was great.
Hopefully we'll do it again next month. And oh, by the way, I will post this up to our YouTube channel. The meeting was recorded, so I'll post it up to our YouTube channel, and I believe it will live on Facebook as well. So if you want to go back and watch something you missed or whatever, you can go there and watch it. It looks like DJ's already left the building. Oh no, there he is.
There he is.
So,
DJ's like, peace out, fuckers.
later, suckers. Anyway, all right, everybody. I will see you all next month, either in person or on this live stream again. See ya.